Hello, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name's Katie, I'm an artist and illustrator, and every 2 weeks I do a recap because I've been doing a daily art challenge since August, and every week I post Sunday to Friday on my Instagram with a new piece of art, and then here on YouTube I just do a recap for the past 2 weeks and talk a little bit more about what I've been creating, why I've been creating it, and what my thoughts and feelings are on the challenge so far. So there's quite a lot to get through in these videos and I tend to ramble a bit, so we're going to just get straight into it. So we're up to week 26 now and day 150. I'm in my A5 Royal Talens sketchbook, and this was created in a sketchbook session as part of Autumn Chiu's Patreon. And this was quite experimental for me. This was using a reference, I believe it was from Mary and the Witch's Flower. I will pop the references down below, as with all of the artwork I'm about to show you. And this one was a timed one. I think I spent a bit longer than the 10-15 minutes that was set as part of the sketchbook challenge. But I was quite pleased with the feeling and atmosphere of this one. It feels quite mysterious, and I like the way that I've done the lighting. I think it works quite well with the blending from the dark blues down to the lighter blues. And this is very messy and it's not finished in any way, but I really focused on the textures and creating the lines with the pencils and obviously the blending with the lighting. So this feels like a proper sketchbook piece, and it didn't perform well on Instagram, but I wasn't really expecting it to. This is just sort of one of those ones where I've enjoyed it and I wanted to try something different in my sketchbook, and it's really nice to be part of these Patreons. I'm part of quite a few artist Patreons now, and a few of them do artist drawing dates, and it's just a really nice way to be part of a community to draw together and also try references which you wouldn't normally pick. So there are a couple of other ones I did as part of this sketchbook session which are also in this sketchbook, but I'm going to be doing a sketchbook flip through, so you'll probably see those in a couple of weeks, but for now that was day 150. Day 151 is still in the same A5 sketchbook, and I was definitely having an off day on this day, and I'm really unhappy with the painting that I created. And this definitely came from a place of not really feeling inspired. This was the very last day of January and the last day of Burbfest, which if you've seen my other videos or seen on my Instagram feed, I did do a few prompts from. And this bird was called a Quetzal, and it's got a very long tail, so I don't think this layout really worked, but I just wasn't very happy with this spread in general. It was feeling very green, and so to try and save the spread, I added on the purple shading at the bottom, and I definitely liked it a bit more once I'd done that. And so although I don't think this is a very successful piece, it definitely taught me something. And one of the things I like to do when I don't like what I'm creating is to look at it objectively and realise some good parts about it. So it's not all bad. So the one thing that I learned from this one and that I took forward from it was the colour palette. So obviously I really liked adding the purple onto the green. They're opposites in the colour wheel, so obviously it works really well in that way. And it's not something that I'd ever done before in terms of pairing green with purples and pinks. So that's what I took from this spread, was the colour palette. So I just created these little swatches, and it's just highlighting the colours that I used, and it just makes this day a little bit more successful in my eyes because I've learned something from it. And I've learned that I really like these three colours together, and it's definitely something that I can then take forward with my practice. And that's a better way of looking at it than a piece which I really dislike. So I've just kept these little swatches in on this page just to remind me. And so although I'm not very happy with the Quetzal, and I don't think I did the wing very well, and obviously the tail is kind of lost, I do like the colours, so that's what I'm taking from day 151. So after that day where I wasn't feeling very confident, I'm really happy that day 152 I created a piece that I'm really proud of. And it's in the very large paper chase sketchbook, which is wider than A4. And I created this landscape scene, which is very colourful, very vibrant. And this started with an orange underpainting. So I did the underpainting in acrylic, and you can kind of see the brush strokes underneath, because then I went over it with gouache, and I just went with a really vibrant colour palette, lots of light greens, lots of chartreuse, oranges, reds and some pinks, and I just really like the atmosphere of this one. It feels quite ethereal, and I don't know, just something about this, I'm really proud of it, and I'm really happy with the colours and the layout. And so I like this one so much I've actually made it into a print into my Etsy shop, and they arrived last week, so they're live in my Etsy shop now. So if you did want a print of this, the colours aren't exactly the same because I had to translate it for print, but it's still lovely and vibrant, and you can really see the details, and like I did mixed media on the top of this one, so you can kind of see the scratchy NeoColor lines. So if you are interested in having this as a print, then I will leave the link down below. But it's quite rare that I create something that I then want it to become a print quite quickly. So yeah, really happy with day 152, and that definitely helped after my sort of wobbly day the day before. So for day 153, I went back to my A5 Talens, and I just created this spread of birds, and this was done using NeoColor Pastels, and then I filled in the background with Gouache. So I wasn't sure at first if I liked adding in the background. I wasn't sure if that was a mistake, because it did look quite nice just having the plain background, but it did feel like it was unfinished, so that's why I went in with just a really light wash of Gouache, just the blue and the green, so I kept it quite simple. All the birds are done with NeoColor Pastels. So I really like the contrast there of like the kind of childish lines, like it's not blended at all, and you know, it's just done with crayons basically. But I really like the contrast there with the soft pastel background. And then I just labelled up the birds. These were a reference from a book, which again I'll put down below. But yeah, I'm just really happy with this spread. I always enjoy drawing birds, and I think these fill up the page quite nicely. The only thing is that I had to cut off the tail of the long tail tit, which kind of defeats the point of the bird. But yeah, I'm just really happy with their expressions, and it was quite a quick spread, and it brings me a lot of joy just seeing this in here because I love birds, and I'm really happy with the colours as well. For day 154, I went out for a walk to my local nature reserve, and I did some plein air drawing. So I actually did two. I did one in the A5 Talens and one in the A4 Talens, and I definitely prefer the one in the A4. I usually only ever create one drawing when I do plein air drawing or when I go out on my own, but I'm really glad I did a second one and did it in the A4 because I think I learned from the first one to then apply it differently in a second. And the other thing I did differently for this one that I don't normally do when I draw plein air is I actually took my paints with me. If you watched my resolutions and art goals video, you'll know I wanted to get out and do more plein air drawing, but also to get a bit messy and take my paints, and this was definitely a step in the right direction. Still not as messy and experimental as I wanted, but I am glad I took my paints with me because I think that really helped with the texture of this page. So overall, I think it kind of captures the mood that was the day. It was quite overcast and cloudy, and it just feels very serene. It was extremely peaceful when I was drawing there. It was just me and the sounds of the birds. So I had a really nice time having this sort of solo drawing date with myself. And yeah, I just really like the colours. It's slightly different to what I would normally do. The reflections are very basic on the water, but just something about this one just feels really nice. And again, I really like drawing outside, and this one brings back the memories of that. So I think that was a quite successful one, and definitely something I want to do more of this year. Day 155 is also in a Royal Talens sketchbooks, and they do really affordable, really nice sketchbooks. But this one is 12 by 12 centimetres, which I got for Christmas. And I just used a photo which I took when I was on my walk the previous day of a little outbuilding, and it really drew my eye because it had some really nice green trim. So for this day I wanted to just draw it quickly in the little sketchbook. Sometimes I'll see things on walks and there won't be a place for me to sit and draw it, which is why I then take photos, and I do use a lot of my own photos as references for my art later on. If I don't know what to draw, then usually I'll just go back through my camera roll and see what takes my fancy. So I am happy with this one. I really like the textures. There's quite a mix of media here. There's some eco-line brush pens, some Tombos, some NeoColor pastels and some coloured pencils. So quite a lot in such a small page, but I like the textures that it's come up with. It's not neat or perfect, it's quite sketchy and messy, but I definitely think that adds to the character. I quite like these bushes here on the right, and if you go on my Instagram you'll see the reference picture that I used for this one. So they were quite tricky to draw because it's like a big mass of bushes, but I do like the way that it's blended in with the NeoColors there. So quite a small, simple one to finish off the week, but I do really like the size and I really like the texture that I've achieved. On to week 27 now, and I definitely did a few more loose pieces this week, including this one for day 156. So this was quite a quick and simple gouache landscape, but I really like the colours. It's quite vibrant, and I've been really enjoying adding texture on top of my gouache landscapes with NeoColors. So you can see it in the lines here where I've added it onto the fields, and I think that's really what makes this painting, and definitely what appeals to me about this one. Because like I said, it is very basic. It wasn't mapped out very well. Like, I didn't do a thumbnail sketch or anything. I literally just painted the page as I saw it. And this is a reference I took from Map Crunch. So this is a website that I use that transports you anywhere in the world, or you can specify where you want to be and it just takes you there. It's kind of like using Google Maps and dropping a pin, but it auto generates it for you. And this is somewhere in the south of France, and I just really like how sort of real it looks, especially with the telegraph poles, which if you've seen a few of my other drawings in my sketchbooks, I do like to add in. And although there are definitely some bits about this I would change, I am really happy with the feeling of it, and I've had it up on my wall over here just because it's kind of the style which I want to develop and definitely want to explore more, but definitely the kind of landscapes I want to create. So for 3 weeks between the end of January and February, my partner Mitch was in Canada and he took a really lovely photo which I wanted to then put into my sketchbook as like a memory of his time there. And this is in the Etchr Perfect Sketchbook, so it's A5 landscape and it's really thick cold pressed paper, and I just painted the scene which he took over the Ottawa River. And I was really drawn to his picture because it was a beautiful sunset and it had the really like snowy hills and the frozen lake, and I just thought that I could paint that and it would be a good memory for him. And I really like the colours. I think it's really vibrant. I definitely could have added more saturation in the sky, but I'm really happy with the river where it was like frozen, so I used the wet on wet technique with the gouache. And because it is on cold pressed paper, I did mostly use paint, but I did add a few little details in with coloured pencils. And overall, I really like this one. I particularly like the trees over here and, like I said, the like iciness of the river. And I also really like the where I've left the page completely blank for the snow. I think that works really well. And I also like the roughness at the bottom where I've kept the brush strokes in and I haven't neatened them off. So I was pretty happy with this one, and it was nice to use pinks and blues, which I don't often use together, and a nice way to commemorate his trip. For day 158, I used some reference photos I took from a holiday to Barcelona quite a few years ago. So I've definitely been using a lot of my own references lately, and also travelling all over the world and trying to find views that aren't here. And so these are done from photos in Barcelona, and some of them are the same scenes, but I really wanted to work really quickly and really experiment with mediums and trying to get that energy into my work. So out of all of them, I think this one is my favourite, and this was the second one I did. This was the first, and then I wanted to try again. And so this is kind of like the warm-up sketch, and then I created this one which I like. And I don't often do warm-ups or anything like that, but I'm really glad I did here, and often if I do a painting then that's that. That's my one for the day, but it's definitely something I want to push and try and see like if I can improve, like just in the day by doing warm-ups and things, rather than just doing this one and then saying, okay, I'm done. Because interestingly, once I'd done this one, I did like it and I was like, okay, that's fine. I'm happy with that. But then I wanted to keep going and I actually prefer the second one. So now I dislike this one more than this one, which obviously I wouldn't have known if I hadn't pushed through. So I think that's quite interesting and something that I definitely want to try more of. I'm trying to push myself a little bit more in drawing cars and more aspects of like urban scenes, which I would normally not include. And like, they're not perfect, they're quite wonky, but there's definitely a charm to them. And I also really like the texture in the trees over here. And it's very simple and they were very quick to do. It didn't take me very long to do all of these. But like, this one was a good study on light because the light was really shining on the buildings at the end. And then this one is quite messy, but I really like the colour of this building here. So definitely some little bits from each of them that I like and can use going forward in creating maybe like a bigger painting and learning from these, or I think this style would lend itself really well to like a sketchbook travel zine. But yeah, they were really fun to do and I really enjoyed them. So for day 159, you'll have seen that I've been experimenting with different coloured backgrounds and base layers. So previously I had tried orange and you'll have seen that with the colourful landscape I did earlier in the large A4. But I also wanted to try, and I'm going to try, lots of different colours. So for this one it was pink, and I created this scene, again referenced from one of my own photos taken in Athens. And I definitely like this more than when I created it. At first I felt like it wasn't very me. I know a lot of artists do pink underpaintings, and so I think that's why it didn't feel quite myself. It feels like more their work than mine. But looking at it now, I definitely have come around to it a lot more. One of the things I'm really happy about is this tree and the foreground. I really love this green colour and I think that lends itself really nicely with the pink background. And the pink definitely adds a warmth to it. I think this would work better if the buildings were coloured and like a mixture of whites and creams rather than leaving that pink. But overall, I'm happy with this one. I like the turquoise and the pink. I definitely like it a lot more than when I first did it, and I did add on a few details with NeoColor Pastels and coloured pencils. And this was a really good experiment. I've definitely learned that I think I prefer the orange backgrounds more than the pink, but I'd also like to try this again with like a blue background, like a base, a purple one, and maybe even black, and just really keep experimenting and pushing myself because I do find it really changes the painting's feel. Day 160 are 2 other loose paintings, and these were done just very simply with dip pen and some gouache. So I actually started with an experiment in my sketchbook the night before when I created this, and this is just done with a stick. So I actually used a stick which I picked up when I went on my plein air drawing date, and I wanted to try and use that and draw with ink with it. So that's what these are drawn with, which is why the lines are a lot thicker, but it was just a good experiment in like creating pattern, and then I used some gouache to fill in the background. I like the idea of that one and I thought it could do with some more exploring, which is why the next day I then created these. And these were done and started as like a negative space painting, so I painted the gouache background on first and just sort of left a shape for the flowers. And then I just used my dip pen, so I didn't want to use the stick this time. I wanted it a lot more controlled and a bit more subtle than the stick could provide me. So I just went in with the dip pen and drew on all the petals and all the little details on the leaves. And I really like these. I think they work really nicely as a pair. So I've got the first peony, which I did, and then the second. And they're just on scrap bits of paper, but I think they'd be really nice framed and like put one on top of the other on the wall. And they just feel very delicate and sweet, and I didn't even think about it, but obviously it was Valentine's Day coming up and they would have made really nice cards, I think. But yeah, the thing I liked most about this was that it came from just a quick evening like experiment in my sketchbook, which then turned into these, which I really like. So I definitely think that experimenting in artwork really does lead to interesting things, and I think this one proves that. To round off week 27 and day 161, I created this landscape scene in my Etchr sketchbook. So this one was actually painted live on my Patreon. So every couple of months I'm doing a live stream with my patrons, and it's done on YouTube, so they just follow a link and then they can watch and chat with me whilst I draw. And it was a really lovely session. There was a lot of chat and it was really nice to see so many people join. And I am happy with this one. I really like the colours. I like the greens and the yellows. This is definitely like a new shade of green I'm really enjoying, this sort of chartreuse green. And it's not perfect, it definitely didn't come out in my head like I imagined, but I really enjoy drawing it with other people. Often, and I know I was nervous before this, I do get a bit of stage fright thinking that I won't remember how to paint at all. But I am happy with this one, and I really like the addition of the swatches down the side. I think that just adds to the whole like sketchbook vibe. Trees are definitely one thing I want to practice, so that's why I added it in here. It's not perfect, but I do like the textures and I think the reflection works really well as well. So this was just a nice one, and it was nice to share this process with my patrons as well. So that rounds up weeks 26 and 27 of my daily art challenge. And I would say I definitely created some pieces I'm really happy with, and some not so much, but that were definitely good experiments for me. I think my favourite is definitely the colourful landscape, which I've now made a print, but I'd love to hear what's your favourites down below in the comments, and if you have any standout pieces or any inspiration that you've drawn from the video. Day 157 also marks exactly halfway through the daily art challenge, so we've been doing it half a year now, and although that's a little bit daunting because there's still quite a lot to go, it's definitely a really good landmark for me, and I'm really happy that I'm starting to see the growth and changes in my art, which is what I set out to do in the first place. So that's really helped spur me on a little bit more because I'm starting to see the growth that I want. And I'm really excited to see where the next 6 months take me as well. So I really hope you enjoyed watching, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks with a new recap and on Sunday with a new video. If you want to watch any of my other recap videos, then I'll link the playlist down below. And if you want to see the daily art as I make it, then the best place is Instagram, where I post daily. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you soon with a new video. See you later.